Hello, I'm Ursula Mohan, and I played Anne Edwards in London's Burning. Anne was the Brigade stress counsellor, mainly dealing with John Hallam. And I was in 3 episodes of the series from 1992 till 1996. The casting director was Corinne Rodriguez, a really lovely lady, and she called me in for interview to London Weekend Television Centre. And I went in and I thought I would be meeting the producer and the director, and the producer, Paul Knight, wasn't there, but the director, John Reardon, was there. And as I walked in, I sort of thought to myself, why do I know John Reardon? And I realised that he had directed the very, very first television that I ever did. And I immediately felt really self-conscious because I thought I had made such a fool of myself when I did my first television, because at my drama school, we never did television technique at all. So the very first television I was cast in was in a series called Tales of Unease, and I was in something called Calculated Nightmare. And we did a camera rehearsal, and after the camera rehearsal, I thought we had done it. I thought we had filmed it. So I got up and walked out towards the door, and the first assistant said to me, "Ursula, where are you going?" So I said, "Well, I was just going back to the dressing room." So he said to me, "But we haven't done it yet." So I thought, oh my God. And I went absolutely scarlet, and I thought, oh my God. Anyway, so I sat down and did film it, and it was fine. And when I saw John Reardon again at the London Weekend Television interview for London's Burning, I thought, oh, I hope he doesn't remember. But he must have remembered, and he did cast me, which was good. I do remember my very first episode. And in fact, after I was cast by John, it was suggested that I meet a real stress counsellor who works for London Fire Brigade. And a meeting was arranged, and I can't remember where it was, but it was in some big offices. And when I walked into these big offices, there was lots of people on desks, and they all turned towards me because they'd all heard, obviously, that this actress was coming in to talk to one of their own about the job that they do. And so I remember saying, "Hello, everyone," to all these counsellors and people who were all working for a fire brigade. And then I was ushered into an office and met the most really delightful, interesting woman who was a counsellor. And she told me a great deal about what the job entailed, and I remember her saying to me that, remember, this was in the 90s, that it was only fairly recently that people were accepting, that fire brigades were accepting that counselling was important to firemen. It used to be the fact that, big firemen were so macho and they didn't need to have counselling and stuff. And she said there had been a lot of persuading to get counsellors. Now it's all different, of course. Everybody accepts the fact that people are under stress and need help very often. And she was telling me that she had been counselling at that time, still counselling people who had been in the King's Cross fire and had seen their mates killed and the public badly injured, and this kind of life thing that happened to them made them, often their marriages breaking up, they couldn't sleep at night, they felt guilt, terrible things, all of which was really helpful to me as an actress. She also said that when she was interviewing people, she sort of leant slightly forward. She wouldn't be forward like in their face, and she would never lean back as if she was being sort of judgmental. She had to kind of keep a sort of middle position. And she also said that she was always very careful about the colours she wore. I mean, she wouldn't wear a bright pink jumper, for example. She would wear something like lilac or beige, or very unthreatening. So the whole atmosphere when she was counselling would be one of absolute unthreateningness, to open up, so that this firefighter could open up and talk about his stress. So so that research was extremely helpful. And when I actually came to film it, I was filming with most of my scenes were with the character John Hallam, sub-officer John Hallam, and that was Sean, what was his name? Sean Bowers, that's right. Most of my scenes were with Sean Bowers, and also his wife, the character of Sandra Hallam, was played by an actress called Kim Clifford. I had those scenes with them, and so it was quite intimate when we were filming, and it was lovely. And John Reardon directed the first and last episode, but the middle episode that I did was directed by James Hazeldine, who had been in the series, and he was a wonderful actor, a wonderful stage actor. I'd seen him very often on stage, so it was a real treat to be directed by James. And very sadly, he died far too young, and just was a real loss. He was wonderful. So yes, so the filming of the first episode that I did was with John, and was easy and gentle, and we did a line run, and then we had a camera rehearsal, and then we just did it, and it felt very easy. And I tried to imagine myself as this stress counsellor, like I was that lady that I met. And that was such a help to me. It really was. No, because I wasn't really in those scenes. I think it was talked about. I was talked about that I had done it, rather than me being in those scenes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's one of those things, isn't it? You know, like certainly I was attacked by the wife in the last episode I did for introducing them, because they had an affair in consequence, which was a total shock to me, because to the counsellor, because she had no idea that that had happened. So it was an interesting thing to play.
Both of them.
Really lovely. They were both very, very professional and very in character. And so we just sort of slotted into it, you know. We sort of said, "Oh, hello, and I'm Ursula, and I'm Sean, and you know, and I'm Kim," you know, and then we became our characters. And because the settings were so real, you know, what the scenes I did with Kim, we were in a sitting room, and so you felt immediately you were in that position, and they were so used to their roles that they were the roles. Do you know what I mean? They had taken on the mantle of their characters, and so we worked very easily together. I remember it always being a very nice experience, always lovely. And the last episode I did, we actually filmed in a crematorium, and I can't remember which one it was, but it was, we all had to go to John Hallam's funeral, and of course it was tragic because he died in the series and everything. And there was a scene of the funeral, and of course the coffin was empty, of course, and we all went into the chapel of rest, and there was lots of tears and speeches and things, and everybody was the acting was so really, really good. It was very, very moving. And during one of the breaks, some of us were talking to the funeral directors who were real, they were actual funeral directors, and there was, you were using their cars and all the rest of it. And we were sort of asking the usual question, what goes on actually underneath? And he said, well, do you want to see? And so a few of us said, oh, yes, please. And it was such a shock because I actually went down into the actual bowels of the crematorium. And it was kind of strange because the chapel was all plush and beautiful. And then you suddenly went down below and it was like a hospital ward. It was all white tiled. And there, of course, were the ovens. And it was so strange. It was so clinical. And of course, there was no bodies there or anything. But we asked things like, don't you ever get the ashes mixed up? And they said no. And they showed us all the trays of ashes, how separate they were and how they had to take out hip replacements and pacemakers and stuff out. And it was such a shock. And subsequently, every time I've gone to a funeral now, and as you get older you go to more and more, all I think about was that scene and thinking, I know what actually happens underneath this when the curtains draw or the coffin goes down. I remember that episode very clearly because of that, and I've never ever forgotten it, ever, all these years later. Well, they were sets, actually. I just can't remember where we filmed, where the office we filmed in. I think it might have been somewhere in the borough. I don't know why. I think that comes to mind. I just can't remember. Really, really can't. Because it was an enclosed office. It might have even been at London Weekend Television itself, in one of the studios, because I seem to remember having a dressing room nearby where we were filming. And certainly we were on location for the sitting room and we were on location for the crematorium as well. And I'd never been to that one again. I've never been, after all the funerals that you go to. So I don't know where that was. It might have been somewhere in West London where I might not have just gone. I don't know. It was quite unusual and it was beautiful gardens, I remember, and it was quite a nice day. And yeah, so that was it. That was the 3 locations I was in. Not really, except when I had a chat with the wardrobe lady, I told her about this stress counsellor, the real woman, and what she said about the colours. And she was very pleased to know that. And so I always wore, in the last scene, I wore a jacket and a coat because it was a winter scene at the funeral. But apart from that, when I was interviewing John and finding out how he was, I always wore sort of soft colours. And I remembered very clearly the positioning of my body, not to come too close in or to do that judgmental look. Yeah, so that's it really. I can't remember very much else. I remember it just being very happy and everyone being really lovely, all the crew and everybody, because they had worked together so much and they all knew each other very well. And there was always a really nice atmosphere because, and I suppose in a way, my scenes were calm towards the usual scenes that they were filming, which would be fires and chaos and, death and blood and thunder. Whereas doing just any of the internal scenes, which were family life or interviews, etc., would have been much calmer and nicer for them. The crew would have had a better day, not so stressful.
Studio.
I think always studio. I never went to the station at all. But I have images of the station very clearly because I've seen so many of the episodes of the series, which I actually think was really wonderful. I always enjoyed watching it because it was so, it was very truthful, wasn't it? Very heartfelt, very well written. And all the characters you followed and felt for them. It's good. I think it should be brought back, actually. I think someone should redo it and bring it back. I was just, it was just a normal makeup, a normal day makeup, something like I've got now. And again, this very light, actually I think in the first scene, I had a light lilac-y coloured jumper on. And in the first scene, I wasn't standing up. So I had a skirt, but I wasn't standing up. So that wasn't visual. You couldn't see that. And yeah, I mean, I think it was just an ordinary day makeup. They never would over make anybody up. And in fact, the character wouldn't have worn heavy makeup anyway, because again, it would be slightly threatening, or, she had to sort of almost blend into the walls, if you know what I mean, to get somebody to talk. And John, in the first interview, was very covered up. He didn't want to talk about problems. And I suppose it must be quite difficult to get people to draw out, especially if they've been through a real tragedy. And he kept denying. He kept saying, I'm fine, I'm very well. And in the second scene I did with him, I was going to sign him off, because I thought he was really well, but he wasn't. He was having lots of trouble, which my character didn't pick up. Anyway, in that scene, I also wore, I think, a beige jumper or something. Again, so it was simple. It was simple costume and simple makeup.
You do now.
Well, I'm still a working actress, and I've been working actually since I was 15. So I've been around for absolutely years. And I've just done an episode of Emmerdale, and I'm playing Mavis. And then I also am doing this solo performance show, theatre show, which I've been touring for about 3 years. And I play this character called Flo in a play called Florence Smith, Now and Then. And Flo was a hospital cleaner, and she lived through the Boer War, the First and the Second War. And her grandson, an actor called Christopher Saul, recorded her when she was still alive, telling her most amazing and funny stories. Anyway, he turned it into a play, and he asked me to play Flo. So we've been touring all over the place in all sorts of venues. We even went to France and played it in English-speaking theatres in France. So I am currently playing Flo. I am Flo. So yeah, I'm still working.
Interview.
Well, thank you very much for asking me. It's been really, really interesting looking back at the episodes that I was in and thinking, oh my God, that person was in it and this person was in it. And remembering lovely John Reardon and everybody and Corin. And yes, it was really nice. And thank you so much for asking me. It's a real pleasure. I've enjoyed it enormously. So thank you.